Can't trust this president to do what's right for this country. You can trust he will do what's right for Donald Trump. He'll do it now. He's done it before. He'll do it for the next several months. He'll do it in the election if he's allowed to. This is why, if you find him guilty, you must find that he should be removed. Because right matters. Because right matters. And the truth matters. Otherwise, we are lost.
Protests, police, and the pandemic. Rage from New York to Los Angeles. George! We're on the ground at the center of the protests over George Floyd's death. The messages, the response, the calls for leadership, the demands for change.
Y'all come up with a better way.
A social crisis in the middle of a health crisis and an economic crisis. What will it take to restore peace? What will it take to bring meaningful change?
Bader Ginsburg, who was far more than merely a Supreme Court justice, has died. She was only the second woman ever appointed to the court and was already a legend when she arrived in the fight for gender equality.
New York, the moment the entire country has been waiting for after a very close race. NBC News now projects that Joe Biden has won the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, and its 20 electoral votes.
And that means we can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden has been elected President of the United States. He is President-elect Joseph Robinette Biden.
The generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women, who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight.
While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity.
Good evening and welcome to the Read Down. If that wasn't any indication, tonight on the Read Down, we will be reading down the entire year 2020. What we just lived through, what happened, what we learned, and what we plan to keep in this year as we move into 2021. Of course, we'll be reading down the GOP for filth and giving you the latest developments on what's going on with the Biden-Harris transition and the Georgia runoffs. This is the Read Down. Welcome again to the Read Down, Stonewall Democratic Club's weekly political hot take. I'm Jonathan Welch, and I'm your host and main moderator. Tonight, for the last broadcast, of 2020. We're so glad you could join us. I'm joined tonight by my co-hosts, Alex Mohajer.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Did you cry a little bit?
I got a little emotional. This year.
I called Jonathan right before, and I was like, "Hey, I started a countdown video that ended up being kind of an emotional review of the year, and I didn't intend it to be, but you're gonna cry. Good luck."
Yeah, I mean the Auld Lang Syne kind of harkens the end of It's a Wonderful Life, and it just,
it is such an emotionally manipulative song, by the way.
It really is, especially a choral rendition. So thank you so much for that. It's great to see you, Alex. I'm also joined by my other co-host, Ebony Murphy-Root. There she is.
Tuesday, last Tuesday of the year. I can't believe we made it through all of that. Woo!
I cannot believe it. Did you get to catch the intro video?
I did. I joined right when it was going, and I felt the feelings, but I powered through. Holy moly.
Apparently someone was just chit-chatting with Stacey Abrams.
Yes. I got to go to a fundraiser, and I almost got $1,000, so we got to have a 10-minute chat right before the big fundraiser, so that was super cool. She is, thank goodness for her.
You and Stace, just first name basis.
Yes.
Just hanging out on a Tuesday. Just chit-chatting on a Tuesday. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that, Ebony. And of course, want to highlight all the work that you and everyone on the broadcast has done for 2020 to bring us into a brighter 2021. We do have somebody, really excellent guest, who's going to help us read down the year. He actually recently ran for state senate in northern LA County and narrowly lost, almost pulled it off. Quite an incredible race. He's a civil rights and pro bono asylum attorney, Kipp Mueller.
Am I here? Can you hear me? Can you see me?
We see you. Welcome, Kipp.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you all. What's up, Stonewall? Love you guys, and thank you for having me. I'm excited somewhat excited to recap. If I could choose a year to recap and reminisce on, I might not choose 2020 first, but we're here. So let's do it.
Isn't it great, though, that we've made it? Okay, so we have 2 days left. And so we can't even say we've made it yet because we have 2 days left. But we have come so far. And it was a year that felt as though it was never going to end. And finally, here we are at the tail end. And we're facing a new year. We may have a very hard winter to get through because, of course, we're still fighting COVID-19. Cases are on the rise. The new mutation has arrived in the United States, which it probably has weeks ago. So we're, of course, dealing with an increase in cases and trying to keep ourselves and our families and loved ones safe. But that aside, we're really looking forward to this next year. Don't jinx us, Jonathan. I'm just saying, John, we're looking forward to it. I'm not making resolutions. I don't do that. But we have a year that we want to discuss because it was quite an incredible year. The good, the bad, the ugly. It was probably the most tumultuous year politically that we've seen since 1968, if not in any year in American history. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to discuss a few topics that are going on right now. First and foremost, the COVID-19 stimulus package did pass the House, was finally signed, and the Senate, and was finally signed by President Trump over the weekend. He was coerced by Senator Lindsey Graham as they were playing golf and spending Christmas together. Just my eye roll can just, continue into the next year over that. But finally, we do have some relief. Of course, Democrats have tried to put forward an amendment to that would give $2,000 stimulus checks to individuals who would otherwise be getting $600. So increasing that to $2,000, passed with a 2/3 majority in the House. And then when it was brought up to the Senate floor, Mitch McConnell himself decided to kill it. I want to start with Ebony because she's fresh off of that Stacey Abrams call, so she probably has some positivity to share with us. But what is this, Ebony? Are we seeing a preview of the next 2 years with McConnell as the leader and Democrats in charge otherwise?
I think we are. I keep seeing President-elect Biden express that he knows how to get along with Mitch, that they have a great working relationship. But I don't know. I think Mitch rather enjoys jerking around America. Is it going to be $600, $2,000? Yes, no. Cutting off people's uninsurance this week. I think Mitch really enjoys this. The look on his face is just that, like, you know, I'm rich and you plebes are just going to have to wait. And it doesn't bode well for the future. But I'm gonna stay in my pop mode, but that Mitch, he is something else. Craven is a kind word for Mitch McConnell.
And of course, we have the ability to potentially take that leadership mantle away from Mitch McConnell soon if everything goes right in Georgia. And we are going to talk about that because we are just a week away from Election Day. But there he is. Move Mitch, get out, please. In fact, I think was move Mitch, get out of the way. Get out the way. A quote from Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, I believe.
Indeed.
That's right. So, of course, this was just all held up by Donald Trump. So what was the point of this? I'm going to go over to Alex. What do you think is the point of Donald Trump just holding up relief for days?
I'll tell you what it was about, Jonathan. It's about political theater. Let me tell you a story about a state called Georgia. You see, Jonathan, all of this is about Georgia. Georgia. This is about Georgia. This is about Mitch McConnell's desire to keep control of the Senate and the 2 Senate races that are in Georgia. It's about Donald Trump. Doesn't give a shit whether we get nothing, 600, 2,000. You don't care. Donald Trump never wanted us to have the 2,000. In fact, I think he would have been totally comfortable letting that bill with the $600 sit on his desk and die until Joe Biden got inaugurated. I'm perfectly clear that that was always going to be his intention. And then the Republicans were like, hey, we've got these 2 Senate races in Georgia. Like, we need you to sign the bill. He signed it. And then Democrats called his bluff. Nancy Pelosi tweeted an hour after his $2,000 check speech. An hour after, she's like, let's do it. The entire Democratic caucus was like, okay, 2,000, let's do it. It's what we wanted all along. Republicans never wanted us to have zero. They wanted us to have nothing. Okay. We called the bluff. Trump signed the $600 bill. Now Democrats have passed a $2,000, an extension of the $600 to $2,000 of direct payment to Americans. And this is going to Mitch McConnell's desk, and very shrewdly. I'm so animated about this, but it's just so exciting to me that Democrats finally have pulled a Mitch McConnell on Mitch McConnell. And Bernie Sanders, I've had my feelings about the man, but very shrewdly is keeping the Senate open until January 1st, demanding that they vote on these $2,000 checks. And herein is the dilemma. You don't want to give $2,000 to America? Explain that to Georgians, Republican. Yeah. Explain that to Georgians.
It's a very good point that you make, because of course we have this election happening in a week, and one of the hardest hit, I mean, the entire country is very hard hit, but Georgians right now are really feeling it. They're looking at Loeffler and Perdue to see what they want to do. Now, of course, Loeffler and Perdue in the 11th hour said that they would support the $2,000. And as we shift into our discussion about Georgia, I want to go over to Kipp. What do you think that this is going to help them? Do you think that politically, how damaging is this to these 2 Republican candidates?
Well, so let me just first say, with regard to Mitch and his strategy, it looks to me like this is the playbook for Republicans. Is they'll do a big Trump tax cut in 2018 and drive this huge hole in our deficit, and then shift over to deficit hawks when convenient. So now they're doing that. They're beginning that shift as Biden won the presidency. And that's going to be their MO for the next 4 years, is being very worried about the deficit. They forgot about it for a few years, and they're coming back to it now. So whenever it's helping everyday Americans and the money's going directly into folks' pockets who need it most, suddenly it's very concerning. I think that I don't know how things will play out in Georgia with this, although I think that if the Republicans aren't able to get the $2,000 bill passed, I think it is a good message for Democrats. And I think it'll be helpful for us if they're not able to pull it off, which it looks like they're not going to pull it off. So I think I agree with what Alex said that Democrats outplayed this one. I think that we're in a good position now because we called their bluff. We said 2000 sounds great. We should pass that. Mitch killed it, and I think it's obvious that he did that, and that people will see through it, and that it'll play well for Democrats in Georgia.
And certainly Ossoff and Warnock are doing their part to make sure that that this is on everyone's minds. And now we're talking about Georgia. Of course, we have just a few days left of early voting, and then we go over to the general special election on January 5th, which is a week from today. So it's very possible that we will find out some results, although it's probably going to slowly trickle in the same way that it did for the presidential, because the same voting models are in place. And speaking of those voting models, as of right now, according to the Elect Project that is tracking how many people are voting in Georgia, they have surpassed 4 million people who have voted in Georgia. It's just over 6 million who are the actual eligible voting public in Georgia. So we are coming up to general election numbers here, and we're seeing that there's high voter turnout. According to TargetSmart, that has published data on the estimated data that they have on who is voting so far, there are this was as of 2 days ago, 67,000 new voters who did not vote in the general election, who are either newly registered or didn't vote, and they're over 40% African American, which is just, obviously an amazing turnout that can help push us over the edge. Ossoff was under Perdue by about 88,000 votes. Ebony, you just talked to Stacey. I mean, and this was a Georgia event that you attended, I believe, right? So how are we feeling while we block Ebony with Nancy Pelosi in the late Justice Ginsburg? But yeah, how are we feeling so far?
So the enthusiasm on the ground is tremendous. They are driving folks to the polls. People know that they can vote tomorrow and Thursday. That Friday is New Year's Day. So if you're going to vote early, to plan for it tomorrow or Thursday. There's tremendous enthusiasm amongst the growing Asian American population, and there's various Asian American populations in Georgia. So that's super exciting as well, especially the younger new Asian American voters. So this is super exciting. It is the new sort of more liberal educated white folks who have moved to Georgia, perhaps for work or have grown up there but are more liberal, and then all these other groups too. So this is super exciting. This really is the new Georgia that Stacey has been working on for 10 years. She was super clear that this didn't happen overnight. So other states are looking to do what she did, to plan for it to take time, perhaps even a decade. But we're seeing the fruits of that now. And so I'm super excited. I'm afraid to look at the polls, but just the energy seems great. And so I'm going to focus on that.
Well, there were a lot of polling errors also, when it comes to the general election. So obviously it's kind of hard to look at polls right now. But some of that data is encouraging. And of course, there's so much more to go. Has anybody been phone banking? What are we doing? What are we doing to help?
Well, Jonathan, if you're interested in joining a bunch of like-minded people who are organizing, you can join the Facebook group that I started with a handful of other people that now has like 180,000 people in it. It's called Elect Ossoff Warnock 2021. It's at facebook.com/groups/Ossoff Warnock. And we are plugging people into phone banks. People who are on the ground in Georgia are putting up door hangers, and they are calling people, knocking on doors. People are canvassing down there. They are delivering food and care boxes to people in line. And if you are in Georgia and you vote and you post your I voted sticker to the group, there's a lot of love and support that comes from all over the country from people who are very, very invested in this. So check that out. But the campaigns are really looking for phone bankers. You can really visit us at stonewalldems.org, and we have a list of phone banks that you can join ahead of the January 5th runoff election in Georgia.
And Kipp, go ahead.
I'll just add, as a former candidate, that those efforts are extremely important. I can't. Before having run, I thought, if you phone bank, I don't know, whatever. I'm sure it does something. But now having been on this side of it, it is extremely effective. It's one of the most important things that a campaign can have. And especially a people-powered campaign when you're up against corporate-powered campaigns. It's the only thing that gives you an edge. And especially since we can't knock doors and do field like we typically do, both candidates are increasingly reliant, even more so than usual, on your willingness to phone bank. So I'd highly suggest getting plugged in. I've been doing a little bit of it as well. Yeah.
It's great. And I'll add that it's not just the campaigns that are doing this work. So you can, of course, take a look at the John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock campaigns directly, but you can also check out the New Georgia Project or Fair Fight Action and be directed towards action that isn't just helping on these races, but is helping to transform the electorate in Georgia and really change the state. They're doing targeted work to reach out to new voters, to young voters, to the AAPI community, which is the largest growing voting bloc in Georgia. Georgia is rapidly changing. I'm considering moving myself, but we'll get to that later. Kelsey says, what training do you need to phone bank? So before phone banking, you usually will get a little rundown on just exactly how to do it, what the procedures are, how the system works, because it's usually an auto dialer that just kicks you through your laptop over to the next caller. You get a script, so you're never alone. And it's always worth it to just have some organic conversations and just be yourself and don't feel like you're too rehearsed. And do also note that it's probably going to be awkward the first time you ever do it. And that's totally okay. It's still appreciated and you're going to get the hang of it.
Jonathan, me and Jonathan phone banked for Joe Biden we would meet up at Starbucks. We sat outside, social distance, and it was fun. We laughed, we cackled, we would have conversations with people. It's really not hard. The training that they give you before you do it is almost unnecessary because it's so intuitive. It's a script. It calls the number, the machine, the dialer calls the number for you. Basically, you just click a button and then it tells you exactly what to say. And after the very first call, you're like, okay, I get it. I get it. It's just like, hey there. And me and Jonathan had a really good time cackling and, guessing what people looked like. And I wonder if they're single. And it was just like, it was a good time. It's a good time.
We would get I'd get a hot name and then see the age and it would be 92. And I was like, oh,
what a hot name.
Hot name. Yeah.
Hot name.
He's like, ooh, Charles.
I know Kelsey can phone bank. Kelsey is my Instagram friend from Long Beach, and we met up at the farmer's market 3 weeks ago. And actually, I was just reading Kelsey's poetry book. So here it is. So I know Kelsey will be a kick-ass phone banker. No worries. Poets are automatic phone banker.
Roses are red. Phone banks are blue. I'm calling John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock.
I'm calling for John Ossoff and Warnock too. Okay,
Reverend Warnock too.
You can say tap.
And you know what? There were a few people, and I'll say this to Kelsey and anybody else who's watching who's wondering, what do I do when I phone bank? You do get a few people who will ask you questions like, where do I go? Where, what do I do? What are the procedures? I mean, this is all stuff that if you're like, oh, you know what? Let me look it up for you and just Google it yourself, Google it for them and help them and give them some guidance that you might assume they already know, but in a lot of cases they don't. And they need that kind of help and they need that push. And that's what you're giving them. And it's so worth it. And it's one of those things that you'll feel anxious before you do it. It's like going to an audition. If you've ever acted, you will feel just so anxious and have the butterflies. And then once you do it, you feel incredibly accomplished. And you know that you did something that helped, even if you just get one person and you get them to get out and vote and you give them the info they need, it's worth it.
Yeah, and actually probably one of my favorite stories from the campaign season was when me and Jonathan Welch were phone banking, and there was a guy across the street with a Trump sign, and he was just standing there, and I ran over there. I made my own sign that said, I just made 200 calls for Joe Biden while this jerk stood here or something like that. And I was just and people were like, beep, beep. So
yeah, we caused
action. Be more than the Trump guy.
We caused a whole ruckus in South Pasadena, where I live, which is, nice and a nice, quiet, very progressive town. in Los Angeles County. And, you know,
Pasadena's got an underbelly, just saying.
I think every place has an underbelly. And
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the reasons why we need to do all of this organizing work, because people are all over the place. And one of the things that I felt, just a quick story before we get on to the main topic here, but one of the things that I felt with that guy who was holding the Trump flag was that it wasn't necessarily a belief that he had that was incredibly deep within himself. It was the fact that somebody else got to him before we had the opportunity to win him over with our argument on our side. So talking politics is something that I will always encourage people to do in your day-to-day lives. It's very worth it because you never know who you're going to talk to, and you never know what kind of effect you're going to have. I mean, I feel like I'm a total nag when it comes to talking about political engagement and voting and involvement and what we do after we elect people, you know, that we have to hold them to account. But I've heard from people in my life who haven't really been that active that it has helped them to feel more informed, and that it helps them to actually create some action in their own lives too. So you never know, and you should always talk politics, even when they say you shouldn't.
So just to add to that, I would speak when I was running for state Senate to Trump supporters at times. And there were some where it was obvious that I wasn't going to get their support, and they weren't particularly interested in getting to know me either. But there were others where they were just in pain, economic pain. And when I talked to them, it wasn't about Trump or Biden. It was, I'm trying something different because my life is tough and I don't know what to do. And for those people, having those real conversations and explaining how what you want to accomplish can change their lives for the better and bring them the comforts they need, the basics. People who are food deprived or don't have even basic health care, that'll appeal to them. And ultimately what they're just looking for is something different and a system that actually looks out for everyone. So it just totally depends on the person. But I agree with you. It's always worth trying and having the conversation.
Yeah, I
True.
think that
and religion and money and sex too. Let's just talk about all of it. Let it go, Americans. We gotta start out with conversations.
That's right. I
think start tonight about sex, and then we'll follow up with religion. Care to join me?
Sounds like a wonderful date. Listen.
It was our Christmases, Jonathan.
That was Christmas.
Yeah, it's Biden's America now, you goons.
It's Joe Biden's America now, you fucking goons. You have to put in the fucking.
Okay.
You have to say the F word. We're an explicit.
Say the F word on this program.
Yeah, we swear. It's okay. But I do think that all brings us right back. Kipp, I'm glad that you mentioned the conversations that you had with voters, because I think that it brings us to our future message, which is that we just have to talk about how we want to make people's lives better as Democrats. That's our main goal. We want to make your life better. We want to make your life easier. We want to help you. So that's kind of the message that we need to carry. But before we carry a new message into the next year, Kelsey says that it goes good with chocolate and wine, just like this podcast.
This feature is amazing. This is the coolest feature.
I know, because we get
shout out to those producing this show. How cool is this?
we love it. We get these great comments from the people who are watching. Sure, Jan, that was directed towards me. Thank you so much,
John.
Let's talk about the year that we are about to throw in the dumpster. 2020 has just 2 days left. I hope that you guys are ready to finish the year out, but we want to talk about what we just lived through. So I'm going to take it from the top. And let's go January, February. Donald Trump was impeached, as you may remember. This was right around Christmas.
December 2019. So now you've actually gone further back into 2019. So just
this was how we started 2020, because he had been impeached, and now we had to hold the trial. And the trial happened in the Senate, and we knew that Republican senators were not going to convict Donald Trump, despite overwhelming evidence, despite the fact that it was right there in front of our faces. One person from the Republican Party stood up and that was Senator Mittens Romney from the great state of Utah. Was from Massachusetts. He was my governor when I was younger. Not a great one. But I do have to applaud Senator
All those binders. There were so many binders full of women.
Lots of binders.
Romney and his binders full of women just arrived on the Senate floor. And actually, he gave a very stirring speech about how just about the moral obligation that was in front of him and in front of the other senators. And he was the only Republican who voted to convict Donald Trump. How surprised were you guys that the Republican Party would not stand up to their own president? Is this not the Republican Party of Nixon?
Here's my surprise face. No, I mean the party of moral corruption for the last 30 years is going to like sell out their own political party power interests for, no, I'm not at all surprised. What I am surprised is that they actually had one crossover, and it actually kind of made me respect Mitt Romney a little bit because, I think that Mitt Romney's a decent guy and actually blew my mind because I remember how viciously I campaigned against him in 2012 and thinking, wow, like maybe he's actually a pretty decent guy. That's where we're at, is like people that we formerly thought were so suspicious of have revealed themselves to be actually decent, but just of different political persuasions. But it's just him, it's just him. And I'll also note that he's the only person in history ever to cross party lines to vote to convict a president of their own party. So it is worthy of note, and also historically in keeping with the fact that it's never happened in history. So at least first in history, Trump got somebody to betray his party. I don't know. No, I'm not surprised. Kipp, you surprised?
Yeah.
How do you feel about this?
I wouldn't call myself surprised either, but I think there was a different, the Republican Party was different during Nixon. They didn't technically vote guilty, but a number of prominent Republicans went to Nixon and told him it was time to resign. And you don't see that today. And I think what's so sad is that the impeachment process just basically is mere theater now. And it used to be this sort of, it was supposed to be sort of the bulwark for our institutions. So the way I see it is, it's kind of what you said about Mitt Romney. The two sides fight it out and the politics happen, and then one side wins and one side loses. But we have underlying assumptions in our system that we all agree on. Democracy and the importance of protecting our electoral system, our democracy, and the integrity of our system. And what we saw here was a direct attack on our electoral system. Donald Trump basically blackmailed a foreign leader in another country to involve himself in our elections and harm one of our main candidates to help himself, and nobody stepped up. And it doesn't surprise me, but it does scare me to see what the Republican Party is willing to do on the congressional level to protect their own careers. I mean, I think ultimately they're just afraid because Trump has their base, and they know that if they vote against Trump, there's going to be a primary and they're going to be in trouble. But that being said, there's a time to step up, and it's bigger than yourself. And they all know behind closed doors that he was delegitimizing our democracy and really denigrating and endangering our system and our way of life. And they weren't willing to put their careers on the line and put them at risk. And I'm not surprised, but extremely concerned, disappointed, and ashamed that they weren't able to do that and step up when they could have.
I'm as concerned as Susan Collins was for the duration of the Trump presidency.
I'm glad that you brought up Nixon, because of course Nixon.
It's apple cider. It's not wine.
There we go. He didn't have the votes, but it never got to that point because he kind of understood democracy in a way that Donald Trump absolutely does not. But this reveal right here that Mimi has shared is that Ebony went to high school in Nixon's
call out.
I'm going to go over.
This is a lot of Connecticut right now. Mimi, I'm regretting letting you know that the show was something.
I want to know.
Yes, good old Christopher Nixon Cox, who was the best friend of, we had big sisters, and he was the big sister. He was the best friend of my big sister Heidi. So yes, the old Christopher Nixon Cox days. Yes, yes, yes.
Is he upstanding? Is he an
He was
upstanding
a very
gentleman?
nice boy who wore khakis. I don't know. There.
Yes, when you're young and you wear khakis, you chances are you're a Republican.
Khakis in Connecticut. Yeah.
Khakis in Connecticut.
Careful counting.
What's khaki? I don't get that.
What are their chinos? Okay. Anyway.
California state.
A tan dungaree, as my dad would say.
A tan dungaree. A dungaree.
I got a tan dungaree for you right here.
That is a very New England thing, Ebony, because my mom always said, like, we got to wash your dungarees. You got the grass stains on it. Anyway.
My mom would be like, what are dungaree? What is dungaree?
It sounds disgusting. So we had impeachment. Obviously, Donald Trump was off the hook. And then we went right into the most intense primary season. We saw candidates drop out. Kamala Harris dropped out before 2020 even happened. Of course, things changed for her later in the year. We'll get to that in a moment. But pretty much started with the Iowa caucuses, which were not great, guys. Do we remember?
Oh my God. Are we still?
Yes.
Are we still at the Iowa caucuses? We're never with this episode.
Oh no, we will, because
like 10 years ago, let alone 50 years. God.
That's right. So do we think that Iowa will host the first in the nation caucuses in 4 years?
Of course.
You
always.
think so?
Forever. Always and forever.
I think no.
Tradition.
I think no. What do you guys think, Ebony, Kipp?
I think it'll be a whole new America then. I don't know. I think Iowa may have been shaken up after that. I remember I had a tweet that was like, the caucuses never went this poorly when Hillary Diane Rodham Clinton was involved. Maybe it'll be Georgia.
Maybe. I think that one of the, here we go. She's like our center square.
She makes an appearance every episode, and I need you to just.
She's here with us now.
Understand, she's always just with us. Sometimes she takes Ebony's seat.
That's awesome. Okay, on the caucuses, I'll just say one thing, which is that yes, it was a disaster, but the irony that isn't like the whole point of this use of technology and what they were trying to do was make the caucuses more accessible to people. That was the point of the technology they brought in. And we have a system for that. It's called a ballot. Like, we already can do that. I don't know whether or not I do think that sort of things change quicker in 2020 now. We're more willing to accept dramatic change. And I think our generation also isn't as satisfied with the rationalization that that's the way it is a sufficient justification for anything. So I think it could change. The way I think the caucuses should be like the monarchies of Europe today. You know, they're these relics that are purely ceremonial, entirely separate from our actual political system, and people can have fun with them. And then there's the actual ballots and the actual vote that makes a determination. That makes a lot of sense to me. And we can keep the caucuses around if people are excited for them. I haven't participated in them before, but I've heard they're fun. So
it's an exciting way, right?
They're innately undemocratic, as with so many different things.
Totally.
Democratic processes that are stupid and need reform, like the Electoral College, caucuses, like just one man, one vote. Are we done with this whole like making it as obscure and difficult as getting a clear understanding of the will of the electorate? Like, how it's not that hard. One person casts one vote, and whoever has the most wins. It's insane that the leading democracy in the world has this much trouble getting their shit together, and that in 2020 we are still talking about what's like the most effective way of having an election. I don't like maybe like no, get rid of the caucuses, do a primary system, let everybody who wants to vote vote, and make it as accessible as possible. And if you're not winning, that's because you're not appealing to the majority of the people. So maybe you need to reevaluate how it is you do business. Not only democracy, one man, one vote, important because it reflects the will of the electorate, but it's important because it incentivizes our lawmakers to do what we want.
But also, let's add that the system that we have in place right now puts Iowa and New Hampshire first in the country. And those are two of the least diverse states that do not reflect the general electorate of the United States, and certainly don't reflect the base of the Democratic Party at all. So like Ebony said, maybe it's going to be Georgia. I think that there might be more of a push in 4 years' time, or less than that now. It would be 2 years' time before we start talking about this really. But I think that there might be more of a push to move it to other states that are more reflective of who we are as a country. What do you guys think of that?
I think campaign seasons are far too long. It's obscene that we have over a year and a half of campaigning for president. It's obscene. It's literally obscene to me. Yes. It's sick. It's like how much can we be subjected to? I say 3 months, have the primaries all on one day. Everybody decides at the same time. And I know there's plenty of arguments for staggering out the primaries, but I think that they're stupid. So I am of the mind that we should have the primaries all on one day. Get your candidate. He has 1.5 months to campaign. We have a general election, then we're done with this trash, this year and a half. I mean, God.
Yeah, it's changed in our lifetime, right? I remember when the campaign season was much shorter. And also, I don't know what the arguments are for why they can't be staggered, or why they should be staggered. So
the argument is that it gives them a chance to travel the country and actually go to
we have Zoom now, so we're good.
Yeah, exactly. We're not doing things in person. I think that we've proven through this year that we actually have the ability to do things a little bit more remote than we did before. So I will add that it was kind of a suspended campaign season because right after the South Carolina primary brought Joe Biden back into the fold in March. It brought him back to life thanks to Rep. Jim Clyburn and his endorsement. Joe Biden completely slammed the competition in South Carolina, and it became very clear that he was the nominee at that point. And then he started kind of running away with races after that. So, Alex, no, that's how it happened.
You're kind of just like under the rug, the confluence of events that included all the Democratic challengers bowing out to consolidate power behind him because Bernie Sanders was coming up and there wasn't going to be enough coordinated resistance to stop him from getting the nomination.
That is correct, but we've been talking enough about Bernie Sanders for the past 5 years, and I'd like to move on. Plus, we'll be talking plenty about Bernie Sanders as he is filibustering on the Senate floor, and I'm actually very, like Alex said, very pleased that Senator Sanders is doing that work. So I'm not opposed to Bernie Sanders, but yes, we did see the end of the Bernie for president era happen when everybody coalesced around Joe Biden and he won the nomination. But of course, that happened in March. And by the end of March, we were dealing with COVID and we were all stuck at home. And Joe Biden was our presumptive nominee for 4 months until we had the nominating conventions, which the Democrats pulled off the first ever pretty much completely virtual nominating convention that happened in August. How did we feel about that? How did we feel about Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Kerry Washington and other Tracy Ellis Ross and other wonderful hosts?
I remember a lot of folks thought it was super elitist, but it was representative of folks from across the country. They were professional. You can't just have teenagers from Walla Walla, Washington doing it. So I thought it was great. I'm remembering the RNC now with Gavin's ex and all of that wildness, but I can't believe that was really over the summer. Holy moly.
It feels like that was so long ago. Every day is like 2 weeks. It's crazy.
That's it. It was just in August, and that period from April to August felt crazy long, right?
Man, yeah, totally. And I thought the DNC, I thought it went well, and I thought they did a good job, and speeches were good. The RNC is what you remember because it was so bizarre. They just bringing on the couple from St. Louis, and it's so surreal to watch, and I suppose entertaining in that respect, but in a dark way. It's crazy that this is. And that's it's hard to watch that and see how that's persuasive to people, but I suppose it is, yeah. But there were a number of speeches from the RNC that I remember well. Yeah, that was great. And then going back, Rudy's and what's his name, the actor who did spoke to the chair. Anyways,
Clint Eastwood. That was 20.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood.
2012, right?
2012. Yeah, totally. So anyway, but I thought the DNC, I thought they did a good job. The production was good. I thought the hosts did really well, and they were funny. Yeah, enjoyable.
Of course, the conventions, or at least our convention, was kind of encapsulating where we were in that moment. And of course, between April and August, we weren't exactly just staying home and getting rest and waiting for this thing to come to a close. In May in Minneapolis, George Floyd was killed by police officers who essentially cut off his air right in plain sight in front of a bodega. Basically, the man did nothing and he was murdered by the police, and that sparked a huge backlash and just a groundswell of support for the Black Lives Matter movement, protests in every city, including here in Los Angeles, some very contentious protests that ended up with curfews and people being arrested and tear gassed all throughout the country. Did you guys participate? How has this changed the political conversation?
I'm proud to say that I participated in the protests, and that I think it would be, as a person who wants to always learn and grow, it was really a time for me as much as I consider myself an ally and super woke and progressive, it was a time for me to reflect on the ways my own cultural implicit biases have affected the way that I operate and speak and allow certain things to happen, or allow a sort of a cultural ignorance or turning the other way. And it was time for me to look at my own contributions to a system that has oppressed people and hurt them. And I felt uniquely responsible to that because of our experience as queer people. And we're part of a group called the Stonewall Democratic Club, which the namesake was born from a riot that erupted in response to police brutality. So I get chills when I talk about it because it really moves me. And I feel that queer people have a unique responsibility to this moment and to this movement. And part of that responsibility is to understand the ways in which we have contributed to this, and to just be different and ask questions and just learn. And if you think that you're above what's going on or that you haven't contributed, you're probably wrong. And it's just COVID-19 facilitated this movement to have the perfect breeding grounds to erupt, and then really just put it right up in our faces so much about systemic inequality, wealth inequality, racial inequality. It all just came to the fore so quickly and so dramatically that I think when all is said and done, I actually think that this year has the opportunity of being a real inflection point of a real major change, but only if we see it through. And I remember saying Joe Biden is not going to solve the problems, but it is now incumbent on us to see this movement through November, make electoral change happen, and then put the feet to the flames to the feet of the people that we've just elected to do what it is that we need to do. So I'm moved by the George Floyd protests, and I think that they are probably the most important thing to have happened this year, even more than unseating Donald Trump. That was really.
I want to put in a little bit of breaking news that happened just before we came on. Of course, George Floyd is not the only figure to be kind of above the BLM movement and what we saw over the summer. The murder of Breonna Taylor that happened earlier in the year also sparked protest, and two of the officers, the two who have not been disciplined for the murder of Breonna Taylor, will be dismissed. It was just put out from the Washington Post as a news alert. So this is definitely an effort that's ongoing. I want to go over to Ebony and then Kipp. How do we feel? Do we feel as though activism has kind of permeated our generation and those who are even younger than us? Do you think that people are now more awake to what's going on?
I definitely saw with my students, even students who wouldn't consider themselves activists, sort of using the language of protest, really grappling with, protest versus uprising versus riots, and talking about it with their parents, using language like anti-Blackness and parsing that from racism in general, and wanting to really understand. And so that really, really moved me. As somebody who has been, pulled over a huge number of times and, asked to step out of my car and asked if my car is stolen, or asked if the owner of my car knows that I'm driving it. It was a really sort of emotional time for me, a time in which I felt very vulnerable. And also just realizing how quickly people wanted to protest, but then also how quickly a lot of folks, especially white folks, got tired, right? How exhausted they were from talking about racism so much, reminded me that we have a lot of work to do, right? It was great to see everybody kind of get energized, and then very quickly people were like worn out from all of this racism talk. And so, we have to keep that in mind. And then also the fact that the person who recorded George Floyd's murder was a 17-year-old Black girl. And then folks wanted to know why she didn't intercede even more, right? So the ways in which we are always asking Black women, even, Black girl children, to do more to save us is always top of mind for me. And so, boy, that was really, I can't believe that was June, but I do feel like we won't go back to where we were. There has been an avenue of conversation that's opened that means that all of us know a little bit more than we did before.
Yeah, I'll just add. So I'm in a very, where I was running for state senate is very purple, and polling showed that the Black Lives Matter movement was popular here. And at the time when George Floyd was killed, our campaigns, it had been a couple months of COVID, and our campaigns felt sort of stale in the sense that we didn't know how to campaign. Kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of momentum. And that happened, and at least up where I live, the movement just took off, and there was so much fire in people's bellies and demand for change. And what was really inspiring to see was that the movement was, especially in the Antelope Valley up here, it was led by Black youth, and they were demanding more than just police accountability, although that was certainly part of the message. More than changes to the criminal justice system. It was about racial justice wholesale, about a country that has had problems with racial justice since we began. We continue to, and finally reconciling these disparities in our healthcare system, our education system, and confronting them head on. And I can just say, as a candidate, I felt a tremendous. It was a burden to bear to run in 2020, seeing this movement and knowing we're the ones who have to carry that baton and really fight for that transformational change in our policy. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to, but we need to, it's incumbent upon us now to continue to put pressure on our electeds to really chase transformational change and confront racial justice once and for all in this country. And I want to continue to do that work. And I think we have the momentum still. And I think Ebony's right that we've sort of knocked down a wall in the sense that there's more conversation willing to be had. We've moved the needle, and we just need to keep that conversation alive and moving.
And a lot of terminology has entered our vernacular. So terms like anti-racist, like we know now that what we're striving towards and how we have to identify ourselves. And also I think that a lot of white people like myself learned that this is our problem to fix, that this is our problem that we caused. This is our problem that we need to fix. And this is the work that we need to do and really dig in. And it's lifelong work. It's not something that just goes away. And it's not something that you just fix within a year. So obviously this is something that we're carrying into 2021 and beyond. And certainly I don't think that the steam has been lost in a lot of ways. And I think it's something that's very much on the minds of everyone as we go forward. And I want to turn that into probably the best news that we as Democrats worked really hard for, which was the election of not just Joe Biden, but also Kamala Harris as the first woman to be vice president of the United States, the first Black woman to be in the executive, the first woman of AAPI descent to be in the executive. I mean, she is just a groundbreaking politician in many ways, and she's taking that to Washington. So I think we're as excited as we all are to have Vice President Harris, or I'm sorry, to have President Biden. Vice President Harris is even more exciting, and she represents big generational change too. So I mean, this is the first time that we're going to have a Gen Xer in the White House. The apathetic Gen X. But,
not that way.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we're so thrilled about that. I mean, this is an administration of firsts. Like, Joe Biden is the oldest person to become president of the United States. But this is a pursuit that started 33 years ago and was certainly fueled not only by his son Beau passing away just a few years ago, because he always felt that Beau would be the person running for president. But of course, when he saw Donald Trump call the protesters in Charlottesville fine people on both sides, he really felt like enough. And so, of course, I think that his candidacy was an answer as well to this movement. Vowing to pick a woman, he picked Kamala Harris. And so now we have Doug Emhoff will be the first second gentleman and the first time a Jewish person will be in the White House or at the Naval Observatory. But, you know, we could consider all four to be kind of in the White House. And Dr. Jill Biden will be the first Italian American. Paisan, I'm so excited as an Italian American to have Dr. Jill Biden as the first Italian American to be in the White House as well. So, I mean, this is just first after first after first. So that is how we have ended the year, and we are excited for January 20th to come very soon. But before we close out, we usually finish with the library, where we read people down and we offer our unfiltered takes. But this is the end of the year, so I want us to talk about what our hopes are for 2021 and what we're going to take away from this hellfire of a year that we just lived through. I'm going to start with Ebony. Ebony, I just feel like you brought that Stacey energy in. Wasn't Julia Louis-Dreyfus part of this as well? Am I making that up?
She was. She is terrific. Woo. And she is an alumna at my school, so I love her. I'm going to go into 2021 with hope, right? At the beginning of the year, I didn't know if we could pull this off, and I was really fearful for another 4 years of Trump, and I'm really prone to, fear and worry and concern, and I don't always know if the American electorate is going to go my way. And then, I was a Kamala person. I ended up voting for Liz in the California runoffs, and I just didn't know. And so to have it all work out like this, to see Kamala, our senator, headed to the Naval Observatory is almost like more than I allowed myself to dream. And so the fact that this all happened means that like other amazing things can happen too. And so I'm going to be really, really enthusiastic and hopeful and positive about the future of this country. I'm teaching all these Gen Zers, and the way that they talk and the things that they write about and the connections that they make me really, really more hopeful than I've been maybe in any of my adult life since I was born in the Reagan years. And so I'm going to end 2020 on a note of hopefulness and excitement.
You and I both were born in those Reagan years, Ebony, and I watched Mrs. America, which I recommend to everybody. Please watch it, and it ends basically with Reagan's being elected, and Margot Martindale plays Bella Abzug, and she says, "Well, the country's just been set back 40 years." And she's right, and guess what? Those 40 years are up, 1980 to 2020. So it's now time to move forward. So thank you so much for that, Ebony. Kipp, do you have some wishes for us for 2021?
I'm also hopeful, and I realized I hadn't felt hope in like just sheer unadulterated hope in the last 4 years. And when Biden won, that was just such a weight lifted. Let me real quick shout out Congresswoman Deb Haaland running the secretary as the new Secretary of the Interior, first Native American cabinet secretary. I wanted to just add that as well. She's leading that department, and it's a department that oversees public lands, including Native American territories. And I think that's such a watershed moment and so cool. I am hopeful about a comprehensive climate change bill that is going to confront climate change once and for all and include, funding for a lot of new jobs, ensure that it's a racially and socially just bill. But I'm hopeful that we get that moving quickly. We rejoin the Paris Climate Accord and start finally confronting that crisis for what it is while there's still time to do it. And I'll just say the youth are inspiring to me. And I spoke with youth a lot, and they would bring up climate change all the time. And it's so unfair to them that we haven't really confronted it for what it is and been willing to catch the politics up with the science. I think we're finally in a position to be able to do it just in time. And I'm hopeful we're going to get there.
Absolutely. And, I think that we're going to see a lot of changes. And I'm really glad that you brought up Congresswoman Haaland, because one of the things that I meant to say as well after talking about the Big Four was that we also have the most diverse cabinet in U.S. history coming in. And it's really exciting to see these departments take shape and to see where we can possibly go. And I think that selection may be the smartest that Joe Biden has selected in this cabinet. So thanks for bringing that up, Kipp. And Alex, give us your 2021 wishes.
Jonathan, I'm not a spiteful bitch, but if it were me, my wish for 2021 and beyond would be criminal indictments for this entire corrupt cabal that is Trump and his cronies. And I really wish it, because it's not just because I'm spiteful. It's because I believe in an America that is just, where the truth prevails, where justice prevails, where right when good beats bad, all the fairy tale-y type stuff. I do believe that at the end, America is good, and that this has been a dark time in our country's history, and that there was a lot of the flaws in our democratic systems and the weaknesses in our democratic processes and institutions were exposed and laid bare and stretched to their breaking point. And I think for me, as a child of immigrants who came to this country to escape that sort of lawless, authoritarian, totalitarian corruption and circumvention of democracy, to me, it's important that justice be served. And so I hope that these folks all pay a criminal price, and that we don't turn away, and that we don't just try to sweep it under the rug or for the good of the country. No, for the good of the country is the rule of law. And that's my hope for 2021. And comprehensive student loan reform. Forgiving $10,000 is not enough. You're putting a Band-Aid on top of a gaping, huge crisis that we've all forgotten. Coronavirus sucked up all the air. This is the next big the next big financial crisis. It's $1 trillion crisis. We need reforms to the way to the interest rates, to the way we lend, to whether people can refinance, whether they can restructure these loans, whether they can be in forgiveness programs. We need to do all of it. We need consumer protections for student borrowers so that these lenders don't engage in predatory lending practices and just extort them and make them be indentured servants for the rest of their lives. So that's my other wish. Sorry. Okay.
I think that that's actually a perfect segue into what my wish is for 2021, because of course, student debt is a really huge problem that we're facing and that the Biden administration is going to have to tackle. And indicators right now are that they are not going to be as ferocious as they should be. And what it all comes down to, folks, is that we need activism. We need people to rise up. We need people to make their voices heard. We got really wonderful people elected this time around, and the work doesn't end there. So for as much as I believe in the people that were elected, it is entirely up to us. 2020 has done something to all of us in all of our lives. We have been able to, well, I guess there we go. Okay. We have been able to finally see that the sheet has been pulled off, the cover has been pulled off, and now we know who people are. So we've seen examples of how people have treated each other poorly, how people have contributed to systemic violence, to hurting their fellow humans, and hurting the earth we live in, or that we live on. And that is very distressing, and it's terrifying to see that there is so much work that needs to be done. But if I'm encouraged by anything, I'm encouraged by the fact that 2020 has also shown us the very best in humanity. We saw people help one another, whether it be to help people get through medical crises, to help people to get through this COVID-19 pandemic, or to help with any kind of economic distress that they were dealing with. We've seen people help their neighbors, help strangers, help people in protest, help the people they love. We've seen the very worst in people. Yes, that's true, but we've also seen the very best in people. And so my wish is that we take the very best and we carry it into 2021, that we be the best versions of ourselves, that we question ourselves, question each other to see what we can do that's better, and that we continue that work and make sure that we push on and we hold each other accountable and we hold each other up, and we get through, not just get through the next year, but that we thrive, and that in a year from right now, we sit in a very, very different spot than where we are now. I'm incredibly hopeful, and I know that I am surrounded by people who feel the same way and who are going to do that work alongside each other. So I'm very thankful. I'm so thankful that in 2020, I hit that sweet tooth. Well, thank you so much. I also baked cinnamon buns earlier. So if we're talking about a literal sweet tooth, I can also satisfy that. But listen, I am incredibly thankful to have started the Read Down here with the Stonewall Democratic Club, and to have done that with the help of Alex Mohajer and Ebony Murphy-Root. I am just thrilled that you two have become my friends this year and people I trust and look up to. And I am just so excited to see what we do in the next year. So thank you both. And Kipp, it has been so wonderful meeting you, and I am just thrilled, and we're just so glad that you fought the good fight in this election cycle, and that you're still here with us doing great work. And if we want to stalk you, how do we do that?
Actually, my website's not there anymore, so it has to be just my social media at Kipp Mueller CA, I suppose. Yeah. But thank you guys, and congratulations on this awesome show. It's really a privilege to be here, and especially on your last episode of the year. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Ebony, for inviting me. Thank you guys. You guys do an excellent job.
Well, thank
this
you
is great.
so much, Kipp. It was such a pleasure, and it was a pleasure seeing everybody and having you all tune in. We will be here, of course, next week for our first broadcast of 2021. This has been The Read Down, which is a production of the Stonewall Democratic Club. You can join the Stonewall Democratic Club for just $25 a year. Check us out. Is it 25 or 15? I keep forgetting. I think it's 25. 25. Thank you so much. I'm losing it as we're winding down this year, but $25 a year. You can join us and get in on all of the activism that we are participating in throughout just Southern California and the country. Check us out at stonewalldems.org, and we will be right back here next week. Thank you, and Happy New Year to you all.